Welcome to the very first podcast edition of the Mohawk Valley Sportswatch. I got Coach Medicis. He's having a little bit of camera issues, but he'll be on with us. You just want to be able to see his smiley face here this morning. I'm waiting for the Statman to jump on. We're not going to have Pags, so it'll just be the three of us. And what a show we have for you today. It's good to be back behind the mic. Not saying this is going to be final, but we're going to give this thing a try as a podcast and see going forward what we'll do, but we'll keep everybody updated. So let me see if I can get Coach on with us. Nick, can you hear me?
I can hear you loud and clear.
All right. I just can't see your smiley face this morning.
Yeah, smiley face after that Syracuse game is right.
Well, I was going back and forth because I was watching that Oregon State game, but I was hoping the stat man would be on here because I wanted to read you a quote that I wrote down here this morning. It says, "A bowl game is not my standard. My standard is an ACC championship." You know who said that?
No one for Syracuse because I don't see that happening anytime soon. But it sounds like a Dino Babers type comment.
Well, let me bring the stat man on. Stat man, this is perfect timing for you.
Yeah.
Because I was just reading a quote to Coach Medicis here. Let me just fix my camera here because I can't see. Let's get a little switch here. All right, there we go. I'm going to read you a quote, Statman. Let me see if you know who this is from. "A bowl game is not my standard. My standard is an ACC championship."
Let me see. That would be who? Dabo?
Nope. I'll give you guys another guess.
Claw Dog?
That is Dan Valeri, Syracuse.
Tight end / quarterback at Syracuse.
You know, guys, I'm going to say this because when Syracuse beat Pitt, I said that was probably the best coaching job that Dino Babers did, completely revamping that offense to fit what he had with both quarterbacks out, Schrader obviously out. I thought that was the best coaching job he did. And I'm going to say this. I think he figured something out with that hardcore run game that they can run that style of offense. I mean, you need a quarterback that can throw the football, there's no doubt. But I completely like the offense for even them to be in a game yesterday with basically knowing we're going to run the football, you got to stop us. So I tip my hat to Dino Babers.
Go ahead, Stat man, because I'm waiting on this one because I got lots to say.
Well, you know, I was watching the press conference with Dino, and boy, he really sounded despondent. I mean, that's probably like the most the most defeated I'd ever heard him sound. Usually, he always tries to put his orange colored glasses on, but he was really despondent last night. I couldn't believe what I was hearing.
Nick, what do you think?
All right, so are we giving Dino credit, even though it's Jason Beck that's running the offense? Are we saying that Dino's getting the credit when the offensive coordinator is the one calling the plays and making changes?
Well, I'm going to give credit to both because you would think that Beck's got to talk to Babers and say this is what we're going to roll with, and Dino I would think has the final say. So I guess I'll tip my hat to both. But I just think they've built that run game around what they have. I think that's the best they've done since I've seen Dino at Syracuse.
Well, I mean, going into the season, we thought Georgia Tech, that's a win.
Yeah,
I mean, there was no anything else about it. I mean, that was supposed to be a win. And for us to sit here and talk about how Dino did this great coaching job to have them in a game that they were expected to win, it just shows you how far they've fallen since the early start. And you can peg a lot of it on Schrader's shoulder injury, but isn't it the coach's job to have, depth at the quarterback spot? I mean, are we that afraid to go to the second string, third string, fourth string quarterback that we're now relying on tight ends and going wildcat all game? Again, because it worked against a team that's even worse than Georgia Tech. I mean, Pittsburgh's horrendous. So we're talking about his a great coaching job because he beat the worst team in the ACC, and he did it without running, without a quarterback. So now we're acting as if that's a good coaching job.
So Nick, you weren't there for the show in August, but we went. Pags Statman and I went through and did our records for Syracuse, Wake, Fordham, and so forth. Which, by the way, tip my hat to Colgate because they started off 0-4, and they won 6 straight. Colgate beat Fordham yesterday at Andy Kerr Stadium, 21-14. Pags had Syracuse 8-4. Statman had them at 8-4. And I had them at 7-5, and right now they're 5-6. But who would have thought that their season to go to a bowl game, Nick? And you made fun of Dan Valeri last year? You said this kid couldn't even make the room. It's in the hands of Dan Valeri to beat Clausen next week to go to a bowl game.
Couldn't even make the quarterback room when he first transfers in, and now we're running our offense through our tight end move to quarterback. Who, by the way, was 14 of 14 throwing the ball yesterday?
He set a school record.
Granted, every single one was a screen because, our offense is just so wide open and, imaginative. But it's just, again, I put the blame on Dino Babers. I haven't been silent about that now for about a year and a half. I mean, it's his job to recruit. It's his job to bring in quarterbacks. It's his job to kind of remember, if you don't remember, orange is the new fast. We're going to come in and we're going to break every scoring record, and this offense is going to be electric. He is an offensive-minded coach.
We're going to ready to play this game.
We've gotten to the point now where we're going to brag about running for 200 yards and throwing for 40 as if that's his best coaching job that he's done in a while. It's really sad.
Nick, I got a stat up on the screen. He's been there 8 years. He's 41-54, 20-44 in conference play. He's been to 2 bowl games. Wow. So the question I'll ask both you guys, and you know where I stand with Dino. I've wanted him out of there for the last 2 or 3 years. If he doesn't beat Wake and go to a bowl game, is he done at Syracuse?
He should be.
I think it all comes down to financials. I mean, he should have been out last year. Let's call it what it is. And financially, Syracuse couldn't do it. He should have been out 2 weeks ago if you're in great shape. I mean, Texas A&M just paid out Jimbo Fisher $75 million to not be the coach. There's no way Dino Babers should last past this season.
No, I agree. And it's terrible, though. It seems like we're at this. This is like a broken record. It seems like we're saying the same thing at this time of the year every year since Dino's been there. It's like after, and even still, even with Scott Schaefer, there was this problem. It seems like every year they've got just like a mile-long list of injuries, and they're always at the key positions, and they're usually the season-ending variety. I mean, could you imagine if we had half the roster and we had like Gadsden the whole season and he didn't go down with injury, what it could have been? So, I mean, a lot of this, I mean, they just have the worst luck with injuries, and they just don't have the depth behind it. And that's on the coaching staff to recruit that depth. But it's just that's always been a challenge, is to get these kids to come to Syracuse.
You know what this reminds me of? I was reading this article last night, and we talked a lot about Coach Prime over at Colorado, and I still think he's going to win there. I think people got to be patient. All that hype. But one of the things I was really disappointed in with Colorado, and you guys are talking about the depth, was when you see the second and third string quarterback for Colorado go in and they look lost. They look completely clueless, which to me means they don't take any reps in practice. It was all on Shedeur Sanders. And that's a knock on coaching. That's a knock on coaching, that you have to have a couple quarterbacks ready to play. And for Syracuse, yes, I know they had Schrader went down, and then who was the backup, guys?
Del Rio Wilson.
Yep.
Del Rio Wilson. And I get it. When you're at that level, your third and fourth string guys at a Syracuse or a Wake Forest aren't the same third and fourth string guys that you have at Michigan or Ohio State. But
Del Rio Wilson was recruited by Florida. He was a 4-star guy out of high school. That's what's crazy about him being so bad.
But you have to develop some of these kids to be able to get in there and play, and to rely on a tight end and a running back. I think that's all on the coaching staff.
But Rock, something you got to remember, and Statman hit on it with the injuries. If Gadsden doesn't get hurt, Valari doesn't even play.
Right.
Valari wouldn't even see the field. So now you'd be in a situation where I don't even know what you're doing. I mean, I think they kind of, I don't want to say lucked out in the fact that he was a former quarterback, but I mean, if he's not in, they're running their third and fourth string quarterbacks on the field as jet sweep guys.
Is he back next year for Syracuse, Valari?
Yes.
Yeah, I think that's his last season.
Is it?
Yeah.
Well, we'll see. I mean, listen, I'm really disappointed in Wake. I think this is the worst coaching job. I mean, Wake has looked horrible from about midway through the year till the end of the year. I mean, they've had some injuries as well. But I think it's a winnable game for Syracuse at the Dome. I think they got a really good shot to beat Wake. Wake hasn't played well at all for like the last 4 or 5 weeks. It's hard to believe that a Wake team almost beat Clemson earlier in the year. And Clemson, they have their big one over North Carolina. So I definitely think Syracuse has a winnable game. But I would still beg the question is, even if they win and go to a bowl game, I think the university has to really take a look at that buyout. I know they don't have the money that the Texas A&M, I mean, $75 million to buy Jimbo Fisher out. $19 million is going to be paid by the boosters. With the way college football is today, guys, and the money that's being thrown out there, I think even if they get to a bowl game, Dino Babers hasn't done any better than 6-6. He had the one good year there. What, they went 8-3?
Yeah.
It's time to move on. Mike Hart's name should come up for the head job there. Sean Lewis, I said, the offensive coordinator for Colorado, I think his name's going to come up, for that job as well. There's other guys out there that should get a shot. And no knock on Dino. Everything I've read, everything from boosters, alumni, he's a great guy.
Yeah.
He's just his time's run out for me at Syracuse.
Yeah, I actually I found I think I remember sending you guys. I was in that group text there where I finally gave it up and said, he's got to go. And I consider myself like the canary in the mine shaft. But yeah, if I'm saying that he's got to go, I think it's definitely time.
So we were talking about Jimbo Fisher. I just want to put this stat on the screen. He's going to get paid $19.4 million within the first 60 days. And then he gets $7.27 million through 2031.
Wow, that's almost like a Bonilla type deal right there.
Bobby Bonilla type contract right there.
Well, it's like Coach O when they paid him to go away at LSU. He was talking about, he's like, wait a minute, they're going to pay me how much money to go away? $75 million. That's what's wrong with college football today. All this NIL and the money, and you want to talk about, so they're going to pay Jimbo $75 million. Wait till the next coach they bring in. They're going to probably spend close to $200 million to hire a head football coach at Texas A&M. That's
must have that type of money.
Boosters money, man. It's crazy.
And Jimbo Fisher's record, and I don't know, you guys will remember Kevin Sumlin, they're the old coach there.
Yep.
His record was better than Jimbo Fisher's through 6 years. So Jimbo's 45-25. He finished 27-21 in the SEC. He never won 10 games.
Wow.
It's crazy. And the amount of times they were preseason ranked top 10 teams, and they underachieved, and they let it go this long as well. Crazy.
Well, and how about all the recruits? I mean, the 5-star recruits. I mean, the facilities there. I mean, whoever goes there is going to have a huge chance to win right away. I mean, there's already been, from what you read and what you hear on TV, there's already been schools that have reached out to a lot of the A&M players because that portal opens up in a few weeks. And it's going to go crazy, the amount of A&M players that are probably going to leave and be on other teams come next year.
Again, depends on what coach comes in. I know I read somewhere that Deion Sanders, the Texas A&M, is a great fit with all the money that they're throwing around. But again, it depends on what coach they bring in. If Dino Babers ends up at Texas A&M, I would expect every player to leave.
Well, listen, I've heard I mean, Lane Kiffin, they just said it's not going. Lane Kiffin just had Jackson Dart, the quarterback's coming back for another year. I think Lane's happy at Ole Miss. He's done well at Ole Miss. Dabo Sweeney, they mentioned his name. Dabo just said, no, not happening. Lance Leipold's name's going to get thrown out there. I think Kellen DeBoer, the Washington coach's name's going to get thrown out there. But I keep hearing Jeff Traylor, the UT San Antonio coach that's done well there. He can recruit in-state kids. I guess he's got a really good relationship with the state of Texas, the high school kids. So it'll be interesting to see. But you'd have to think that that's the best job in college football that's open.
As of right now, yes. I mean, you got to see what happens down the road. I mean, first off, is Nick Saban coming back? Because if he leaves or retires or something happens and he's out, and I don't care what job, I don't care if it's Ohio State, Michigan, whatever. I think that's the number one job. And again, you know what happens with Harbaugh? Harbaugh goes to the NFL. Michigan's a much better job than Texas A&M at this point.
Yeah, I think the other interesting one's going to be what happens at Michigan State. With that job opening up with Mel Tucker, with that fire and that whole debacle. I've heard Dave Clawson's a candidate for that. I heard it's down to 3 coaches. I don't know if that's the right fit for Dave Clawson. One of the things I was thinking about with Coach Clawson, and I was thinking about it on the way in, because, I've been high on him for a long time. I still think what he did at Wake Forest was unbelievable. But it almost begs the question, Nick, is somebody like Dave Clawson that goes to a school like Wake, has he outkicked his coverage? Has he done the best he's going to do there? The year they went, 10-2 or 9-3? You're not going to do better than that at Wake. So is it time for him to move on and give it another chance somewhere else? I don't know.
Well, you got to remember that he's in the ACC as well, which is what would you say, the 4th best football conference, 3rd, 4th, somewhere there. So the fact that he can take a Wake Forest and go 10-2 and realistically have a shot to play for an ACC title, where if you go to Michigan State, I'm sorry, you'll have your 1 or 2 good years, but you're not competing with the Michigans, the Ohio States, now the Oregons, the USCs, the teams that they're bringing in. You're talking, all right, I'm going to be at best above the middle of the pack type team, where at Wake Forest, yes, it's not the ideal job, but he's been successful there. He's brought in the right type of people to win there. And you see what Sam Hartman's doing at Notre Dame. For those people that didn't know who Sam Hartman was, I mean, he's basically carried the Notre Dame offense for most of the year. So I don't see how going to Michigan State is a better job or a better fit for him. Is it more prestigious, I guess you could say? Yes. Only in the fact that, Michigan State's a bigger sports school than Wake Forest. Yeah. But, I mean, if you're talking what spot do you have a better chance to win and compete, I think it's Wake. And I think it would not be like this wouldn't even be a conversation before he got there, because Wake was the joke of the ACC. And the job that he's done there, whether he does this for the next 4 or 5 years, I mean, the people of Wake got to be thankful that Dave Clawson was even there, because what he's done there has been special.
Well, I think the other thing to think about is the Big Ten and the SEC are going to be the 2 mega conferences for so many years. You might see Clemson leave to go to the SEC. I think you're going to see potentially Florida State. I think you're going to see more teams out of the ACC that are going to potentially jump. So I think you're going to see those 2 mega conferences. I think now with the playoffs going to 12 teams, I think money-wise, Dave would be in that $7-8 million range. And I don't think Dave's in it for the money. I think he makes $3-4 million a year at Wake Forest. And I think after a season like this year, when you read on Twitter, people are saying, well, maybe Dave Clawson's going to get fired. But then you see people that are saying, what he's done for the program over the last so many years, Dave deserves another season there. I don't think if he wants to stay there for the next 10 years, I think Dave Clawson stays.
Yeah.
But I think with the way college football is going, Wake's a tough place to win at, especially with the academics. But I think if it was me, I'd stay put. I think you got a better chance to win in the ACC. Clemson, Florida State, Miami, they're not going to be in the ACC long. it's only a matter of time before they jump out of there. Who knows? You may see the old Big East come back.
I was just saying, you might see the old Big East. Listen. I'd take Dave Clawson at Syracuse in a second. I think that would be kind of a lateral move for him, but probably a little step up as far as Syracuse. But yeah, I just don't see. I think he's earned himself at least a couple more years, if that's what he chooses to do.
Listen, I wouldn't rule Syracuse out, guys. He's a New York State guy. I would not rule that out for him to come back home and come this way. Now, I know, we talked about it, Nick, when we were before we came on live, but if Dino goes, Mike Hart's name's going to get mentioned, for that job. Now, I don't know.
As it should.
I don't know what's going to happen at Michigan. I was saying in the group chat that we have, I said in August, win or lose, I didn't think Harbaugh would be back next season anyways. This is before this whole sign stealing even happened. I said it on the radio and said, even if they go undefeated and win a national championship, or if they get beat, whatever, I thought this would be Jim Harbaugh's last year, because why do you want to deal with the NIL? Why do you want to deal with the NCAA? Why do you want to deal with the transfer portal? He's making $7-8 million a year now. Go to the NFL where you don't have to deal with any of that bullshit anymore. And especially this year, he's already missed 4 games, and now he's going to miss his 5th game. And depending on what happens, they're saying he might be suspended for the bulk of next season. So why deal with that stuff if you're Jim Harbaugh?
Well, especially given the situation right now, I think he's got one foot out the door right now, knowing that. I know we talked before we got on air about there's already 3 or 4 spots that would be nice spots for him to jump in and take off right there in the NFL. So I don't see him sticking around, but it'd be a nice, final voyage to go out and win a national title and say, screw you, NCAA. You can go at me for stealing signs, even though every team does it. Yeah. You can go at me for that, but I'm just going to go ahead and win the whole thing, and then I'm going to ride off into the sunset.
A lot of people have asked me about this. Nick from C-Bus has been on me quite a bit, a lot of the Ohio State fans. And I'll say a couple things on this. Do I think Jim Harbaugh knew about all this? I've said this we've talked about Jim Boeheim, right? We've talked about North Carolina. We've talked about all this. I firmly believe that he knew about it. Now, to the in-depth that this thing is going, I don't know. Maybe not as where it's at. I do think he knew about it. I do think internally there's a cover-up, whether it was with computers, phones. There's nothing right now that they could track that points to Jim Harbaugh. Now, is it Connor Stalions? They're saying that Stalions' good friend was Jim Harbaugh's son. Are we going to see Jim Harbaugh's son be the next coach that gets suspended? More will come out. But here's what I'll say about all this. And Ohio State fans will say, well, they beat us the last 2 years because they knew the signals. How about the fact that they're going to have 25 or 26 players on this roster go to the NFL? Can't we just say one thing and say Jim Harbaugh over the last 2 or 3 years has finally matched the talent of Ohio State?
Yes.
Yeah.
You still have to have talent to win games. Whether you knew the signals or not, Ryan Day changed the damn signals. If they had the signals for TCU, and TCU beat the shit out of them. It was the worst game Michigan played all year, right? They gave up 40-something points. So my thing is, I don't disagree that I think the sign stealing puts you at an advantage because you have an idea what the play is. As Coach Prime said, you still have to stop it. But can't we just say that the talent level now between Michigan and Ohio State, the gap's closed?
Yes, definitely.
Right,
Yeah.
Nick? I mean, that gap is closed.
I think it's definitely close. And again, Ryan Day's got to worry about his own job right now before he starts worrying about other things. If Ryan Day doesn't beat Michigan and goes 3 straight years of losing, I think his name's going to come up on the hot seat, regardless of being 11-1. You have to beat Michigan at Ohio State.
Well, and I'll say this, like my wife said this yesterday. My wife don't listen to us on the air, so she's not going to hear me. But she says, well, Ohio State beat Maryland 30-something to 17. And I said, well, but here's the difference. The last Michigan had to go to Penn State. Okay, Michigan beat Penn State. They ran the ball 30-something times straight. And everybody will say, well, they didn't look the greatest. Okay, well, they ran for 200 and something yards against the second best run defense in the country. They didn't have to throw the ball. Yesterday, did they look good against Maryland? No, J.J. McCarthy hasn't looked very good the last 2 weeks, but he hasn't had to throw the damn ball in 2 weeks.
But isn't it one of those things where you start looking ahead and you start thinking about that Ohio State game in a couple weeks? Your head coach, there's a lot of drama and scrutiny around your program, and you start peeking ahead at that Ohio State game. So it's not a surprise near the end of the year by that Ohio State game, we start peeking ahead. And let's not mistake, Ohio State's had some close games as well against teams that Michigan beat up on.
True. Very true.
Oh, yeah, there's no doubt. And I mean, listen, yesterday, Maryland's a good team. Maryland scared me last year. Michigan only beat Maryland last year by a touchdown. And all I said was, you have to get by this game. I didn't care if they won 3-0, 21-20.
Yep.
Of course they're looking at Ohio State. That's the game. That's the season. This is what every college football fan, like my wife roots against Michigan to lose every game. And I said to her yesterday, if I'm an Ohio State fan, I want them to be undefeated every year going to play each other at the last game. I want them number 1 and number 2. The winner plays for the Big Ten title. The winner probably goes to the play. Like as a Michigan fan, that's what I hope for every year.
Well, in the future, you might get 2 games in a row if this conference works out.
But I'll say this because we'll pick a lot of the rivalry games next week. I'm a little concerned about this game. I think that there's 2 things I'm looking at of the last 2 weeks. J.J. McCarthy hasn't had to do much. He missed a couple big plays yesterday. Throwing the ball I know Sherrone Moore calls the plays, but having Jim Harbaugh on the sideline, the relationship that Jim has with those players and him not being there makes a big difference. But I'll also say, does Sherrone Moore not have the confidence in J.J. McCarthy in certain plays, or is he not exposing J.J. because he knows come next week, you're not going to be able to line up and pound the ball 30, 40 times and beat Ohio State next week? I just don't see it. I know they did it the last 2 years, and I think they're going to try to run the ball, but they're going to need J.J. McCarthy to make some plays with his legs. They're going to need J.J. to make some throws. What worries me the most about Ohio State is I think the defense is much better than it was a year ago. But I also think that if you can stop or contain Marvin Harrison, I don't think Ohio State's going to run the ball against Michigan. I think Michigan up front's the best run defense in the country. But can they contain Marvin Harrison, and can they eliminate the big plays? And that Michigan offensive line's a little banged up. So we'll see what they could do next week.
Well, and if you're Michigan and you're playing against Penn State and you see that they can't stop the run, you pound the run. If you're playing Maryland and you're up, why are you showing anything else to give any sort of advantage to Ohio State? I'd keep everything in my back pocket. If I can be as vanilla as possible and open things up, and if I need a big play, I have a big play. I'm not showing them anything. So and again, in a game that's going to be that close, 1 or 2 plays could be the difference. Why show anything early? Let them watch the last couple of games and then open up the playbook a little bit.
So I think I was sending you guys messages, but my wife and I, when we were at the Penn State game, we were down there. We were about 7 or 8 rows from the field on the 10-yard line.
Wow.
And we were on the Michigan bench side. So we were right by Big Noon Fox kickoff. So we saw Urban Meyer, we saw Mark Ingram, we saw Charles Woodson, Brady Quinn, Matt Leinart. But during the game, as the guys were walking out, I saw a lot of the Michigan guys coming out of the tunnel. But I'll tell you what, I had never been. I mean, my dad and I were at Miami, Nebraska years ago for the national championship game. But being up close for a big game like that, to hear the pads and just seeing what these teams do, it was unbelievable. to see a game like that up close.
Wow.
It doesn't sound the same as your 12U Pop Warner football team.
No, unfortunately, it does not. But I saw Charles Woodson was on the sideline, got a chance to see him. I mean, I was probably, I don't know, from where I'm sitting in my office to maybe my door from Charles Woodson.
Wow.
Uh,
Hey, all jokes aside, congrats on a great 12U football season. You know, you guys had a nice
year.
run there.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was a good year. It was sad to see it end, but we had our little 12U get together last night, and then next week's the Pop Warner banquet up at Elevate, the sports complex. So
See, they got to understand the Rock effect. You went from what? 0 they didn't win a game last year to playing for a state semifinal.
well, they won one game, so they went 1-7 or 1-8, and then this year we ended up winning the Tri Valley and going 9-1. But you know, Nick, I say the same thing like with basketball with the young kids. Is I told the coaches, I said, what I feel good about is for these kids next year, the ones that'll go play modified, at least they're going to have an understanding of football. You know what I mean? If it's not going to be the same stuff, but at least they're going to be more prepared, I think, next year than what they've been in the past to go play modified.
Right. That's all you can ask for.
And that's really, you know, that's really all you can ask for. We ran into the team from Syracuse, which was Henniger High School kids. We just hadn't seen that speed and, you know, that physicality all season.
Steps in the right direction. That's what it's about.
Oh yeah. So guys, the last thing I want to say about Michigan, I have on here. So Jim Harbaugh is 83-25, 58-17. He's won 10 or more games in 6 seasons, but he's only 1-6 in bowl games since he's been at Michigan. And I still think he's going to the NFL next year, regardless of what happens. And then the question is going to be is, does he bring Sherrone Moore and Jesse Minter with him to the NFL? Does Mike Hart get a chance potentially to be the head coach? I still think Mike Hart needs to be the OC before he can just be the head coach. But I think Sherrone Moore's auditioning, you know, for this job because I think he'll stay. And I think Jesse Minter will go when Harbaugh leaves. But how nice would it be if they beat Ohio State, they win a Big Ten championship, and Tony Politi, the Big Ten commissioner, has to hand the Big Ten trophy to Jim Harbaugh on national TV. That's all I want to see. I don't care if they lose.
Awesome.
I want to see him hand it to him.
If he's there.
If he's there.
If he's there. I mean, the most Big Ten thing would be to suspend him for that game and hand it to someone else.
Yep.
Well, we're going to see. I mean, we got to get through next week first. But, guys, I want to run through some of the high school scores. There were some high school regional games. Dodgeville in the Class D got beat to Tioga. This is the second year Dodgeville played Tioga. It was 56-12. Tioga is real good.
Always
every year. Always tough. Whitesboro beat Vestal. They beat them 31-7, so hats off to Whitesboro. Adirondack fell to Waverly. It was 49-8. Maine Enwell in the Class A beat Indian River 41-14. CBA in the Double-A beat Elmira 49-20. And I'm saving the best score for last. Pembroke, an 8-man.
This one.
They beat Frankfurt Schuyler 107-64.
Oh my God.
107-64.
Wow.
The best part about that was the quarterback for Frankfurt Schuyler contributed 9 touchdowns. 9 touchdowns to his team and still lost by 43.
Wow. Unbelievable. I went to a football game and a basketball game broke out.
It's like Arena League.
Yeah.
I don't know many basketball games that are putting up that many points.
Yeah, right. Nowadays, yeah, you're right.
But, guys, some of the top 25 scores, let me just run through some of these, and we'll talk about some of them. Georgia, 38-10. I think Georgia's peaking at the right time. They beat Tennessee. Ohio State was in a dogfight for about a half over Minnesota, but they win 37-3. Michigan, we talked about, 31-24 over Maryland. Florida State, awful news to see Jordan Travis, the quarterback. Looked like he broke his ankle. It was awful. But they beat North Alabama 58-13. The game I was watching last night, Washington and Michael Penix, they continue to find ways to win these close games. They beat Oregon State 22-20. Oregon, in my eyes, I know Cody's probably listening. I think they're the best one-loss team in the country. They beat Arizona State 49-13. Texas beat Iowa State 26-16. Alabama, we're going to see if they can beat Georgia in the SEC title game. They hammered Chattanooga 66-10. I'm not used to this. Let's see. We got Florida, Missouri 33-31. Louisville punches their ticket. They'll play Florida State in the ACC title game 38-31 over Miami. Penn State at home, they beat Rutgers 27-6. Ole Miss, they beat Louisiana Monroe 35-3. Oklahoma beat BYU. LSU hammers Georgia State. Iowa, this game was 3-2 at one point, guys. And they will play for the Big Ten championship. They beat Illinois 15-13. Arizona, how about the job that Jed Fish has done in Arizona this year? They beat Utah, and then Notre Dame beat Wake. Clemson over North Carolina. Kansas State beat Kansas. And then Oklahoma State, they beat Houston last night as well. So I was looking at some of these teams this year, and I was trying to think of, there's been a lot of teams that have been a huge disappointment. Obviously, I think Lincoln Riley at USC with Caleb Williams is probably the most. I had USC in the playoff to start the year. They were my fourth team. I had Texas in there, and then I had Michigan, Georgia as my four playoff teams. But how about Miami and Mario Cristobal, 6-5? His time there hasn't really been, I think, what everybody expected it to be. But I think you guys can probably agree. Is there any other job other than USC that you could say a 7-5 USC team with the star-studded power that they had? Was there a more disappointed team this year in college football?
Unless you're going to bring up Texas A&M and the struggles that they've had this year, obviously with getting rid of Jimbo. But no, I mean USC projected number one, pick next year, franchise quarterback. And then to see them losing games, him going up into the stands, crying with his mom after game. It's just been a mess. The jokes about how they try to outscore everybody and their defense is giving up all these points. I mean, Lincoln Riley was brought in there to compete for national titles. And they're walking out of the Pac-12 kind of limping into what is a much bigger, stronger, faster, better conference. So, I mean, unless changes are made sooner, again, we don't even know if Lincoln Riley is going to be there. There's a lot of talk that he'll join Caleb Williams wherever, whoever gets that number one pick, number two pick, and hope to bring Caleb Williams with him and kind of see if they can outscore everyone in the NFL. But, I mean, I can't tell you another team more disappointing than them.
No, I would agree. I think it's USC. The other one you could say, but I'm going to go back to when I was at Penn State. Everybody was saying, fire James Franklin, and there was a lot of Michigan fans at that game, so it was kind of nice because where we were at on the 10-yard line, I will say this: the Penn State student section is unreal. It's like the entire from the 10-yard line all the way over, like it wraps around. Those kids go nuts. Like when Michigan had the ball backed up onto the student section, I kept saying to them, I mean, you see it on TV, right? You say it's hard to go into the student sections. But when you're there and you hear how loud that freaking stadium is, I don't know how you run a play. I don't know how you can hear it. But I'll say this, like everybody was saying, James Franklin's got to go. And I was sitting there saying, big game, James, big game, James. And my wife's going, will you shut up? Will you shut up?
She wanted him to win.
Oh, yeah, she did. She wanted them both to lose. But she was rooting for Penn State. And I kept saying this. Nick, I always go back to what you always say about expectations. James Franklin's going to go 10-2, 9-3 every year. Yep. They're in a New Year's Bowl game every year. He just can't beat Michigan or Ohio State.
Yeah, well, that was Jim Harbaugh's. That was Michigan a couple years ago.
Yeah, and then they cheated and everything turned.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, it was all about the cheating. The only other team that I throw out there is Clemson. High expectations in Clemson. close game with Florida State early on. You know, the early loss to Duke kind of the wheels started turning. I mean, again, they're what 8-4. What are they right now? 7-4, 8-4. Probably gonna be 8-4, 9-3, somewhere in there.
Yeah.
There's 80 other teams that would love to be in that position, but to be a Clemson, you should win the ACC or be in the ACC title game every year and compete to get in that playoff. So I think they're a disappointing team, but nowhere near the depth of a USC.
Do you think Penn State moves? I don't think they move on from James Franklin. I think he's there. You know, he's from state of Pennsylvania. I think he's there. You know, don't be surprised if A&M comes calling for James Franklin. Franklin's a hell of a recruiter. That defense is legit. Like, that defense is top 10 in the country. Drew Aller's a young quarterback that I think will develop with time. I think Penn State's going to be good. But again, I go back and say is that Penn State, Michigan, Ohio State that have been the kings of the Big Ten. Now comes USC. Now comes Oregon. Now comes UCLA. You know, I was looking at the Big Ten schedules for next year. If I'm Jim Harbaugh, I'd run now. He's got to play Texas. He's got to play Oregon. He's got to play USC, UCLA, and Ohio State next year. You want to talk about a gauntlet for a schedule, but the good news is you go to a 12-team playoff next year. So it gives you a little bit more of an opportunity. But if I'm him, I run now. But I don't think it's going to get any easier in the Big Ten for anybody.
No, I think the Big Ten is going to be fun to watch next year. I mean, all the talk about the SEC and how they beat each other up for the last couple of years. And I know you're a Big Ten homer and you're going to talk about the Big Ten, but it's kind of how the SEC's been for the last, 10, 15 years, especially when they added Texas A&M a couple years ago. Now you're adding Texas and Oklahoma. I mean, those two conferences in itself, you could run a playoff out of that and have some fun between the two conferences.
Yeah.
But again, it's just building up the excitement for next year with all the conference realignment. And then you're sitting here. I know me and Statman are sitting here as Syracuse fans who, for the last couple of years, we've been saying we don't belong in the ACC. We don't belong in the ACC. Maybe we can sneak into the Big Ten and get some money. Nope, never mind. Keep us away from the Big Ten. So it's just interesting to see where a Syracuse type team fits out in the future. You know, ACC is gonna lose Clemson, gonna lose Florida State, Miami. What happens to the ACC at that point? Do they kind of disband and it turns into what happened at the Pac-12 where everybody kind of runs and, Washington State is kind of left out to dry. I hope the same doesn't happen to the local boys.
So you guys, right now, who's your top 5 in college football? Who do you have, Nick?
I got Georgia 1. I think they're the best team in the country right now. I got Michigan 2, Ohio State 3. I don't think it really matters who's 2, who's 3, because they're playing next week. So whoever wins is going to take that 2 spot. I still have Florida State 4. I know the injury is going to change things, but it doesn't diminish what they've done all year. And I got Washington 5. I would be okay with flip-flopping them, especially if Washington beats Oregon a second time. I think that in itself is worthy of jumping them ahead. But I got them 5, and then Oregon and Texas are on the outside. I know Cody's hammering that Oregon's a top 3 or 4 team. But at the end of the day, they did lose to Washington, and the other teams are undefeated. Texas also sitting there with only 1 loss. So I mean, I think they're right there with Oregon as well. And again, I know what you asked me for 5, but don't forget about Alabama. I mean, they're at number 8. They got Georgia coming up. I mean, you can beat Auburn, you can beat Georgia, and maybe sneak into that top 4.
Statman, you got anything different?
Not really. I mean, I would just switch the order of Michigan and Ohio State. But yeah, I mean, I pretty much would say the same. Yeah.
So Nick, I'm gonna go with you. I had Georgia, Michigan. I think they've been the 2 best teams in the country the whole entire year. The only reason why I'm gonna put Michigan over Ohio is because I'm still going off of Michigan beating them the last 2 years, and they get this game at home. Ohio State, I know they've been scoring points, but a lot of the teams that Michigan has played, like last night, Minnesota, they were in a dogfight for a half. They were in a dogfight against Maryland. They were in a dogfight against Rutgers. But I'm with you. You can interchange those two, but I think Georgia and Michigan are the two best teams in the country. I'm going to go Ohio, Washington, and I still wouldn't rule out Florida State, because here's the thing on Florida State. People don't remember this. They opened up the season and beat an LSU team right out of the gate.
That's right. Yeah.
And then they won at Clemson at the beginning of the year when Clemson was preseason top 5 or top 10.
Yeah.
So those are still two really good wins for Florida State. I think the downfall, I think Oregon's the best one-loss team in the country. I wouldn't want to play Alabama. I think we're going to be talking about the same thing that we talk about all year, is if Alabama beats Georgia and Alabama's a one-loss SEC champ team, are they in? Because chaos is going to hit the fan here over the next 2 weeks. Because if Bama beats Georgia, let's just say they beat Georgia, is the committee going to drop Georgia from 1 out of the top 4? Possibly. That's how Ohio State got in last year, right? Ohio State was number 1 or number 2. They lost that game to Michigan, and they still snuck into the playoff. So does Georgia drop out of the top 4 if they lose? I don't know. Texas and Bama, how much do you rely on the head-to-head? Texas beat Alabama earlier in the year. So you can't put Bama over Texas. What if Texas wins the Big 12 title game with 1 loss? Are they in? So there's a lot of scenarios. If Florida State wins out and they win the ACC championship, are you going to leave an undefeated ACC 12-0 team out and put a 1-loss team in? I don't know. So we're going to see, but I would go with those 5. I still think Florida State defensively, they're one of the best defenses in the country. I think they got some of the best skilled guys in the country. I still think they're really, really good. So we'll see. In Washington, Nick, as you said, Washington is going to play Oregon again for the Pac-12 title. So if they beat Oregon, Washington is in, because the Pac-12 this year, with the amount of ranked teams that they had, they're battle tested. They're in.
Yeah, and again, I think there's just so much that can happen. I mean, normally we have this conversation. It's like week 8 or 9. We're getting to the tail end here, the last 2 or 3 weeks of the season. I mean, there's going to be a lot of movement here in the next couple. I mean, what happens if we go back to that Michigan-Ohio State game from a couple years ago, where it was inches away from, a first down, not a first down? I mean, if one of those two teams lose, and they're losing by a last-second field goal, do they deserve a shot to sneak in as the 4th best team over a Florida State team that's coming in with their backup quarterback in a weaker conference? If Oregon and Washington play a close game, they split the season series, it's close. If Georgia loses, there's just so many scenarios that can happen down the stretch. It's what makes college football exciting. And I hope we don't lose this going from 4 teams to 12 teams. We'll be having this conversation about the 12th best team instead of the 4th best team.
I think even if Georgia loses the SEC title game to Alabama, it would be really hard for me to drop Georgia out, losing to probably one of the hottest teams in the country right now in Alabama. I think it's the best coaching job Nick Saban's done at Alabama this year. It would be really hard for me to drop Georgia out. It really would.
Can we mute comments?
Yeah, I was just gonna. Yeah, right.
Right.
14 plus a 2 week
Oregon bias here.
Cody's got. What do you say? Oregon beats Washington by. Well, I don't know if they beat them by 2 touchdowns.
Got Oregon as the number 1 team in the country too, with Washington 2, Georgia 3, and Michigan 4.
And Bill's got a good statement here on.
Absolutely.
On Alabama here. I would agree with you, Bill. Bama's a sleeper. Milroe's worked his way from benching a trip to the Heisman dinner. They went out. Yeah, I would agree. I'm not a huge Nick Saban fan, but I'll tell you what, it's hard to argue this wasn't the best coaching job. Everybody was bad-mouthing Tommy Rees, saying, oh, Tommy Rees is in over his head at Alabama. How about tip your hat to the whole damn coaching staff?
Oh, they had no quarterback early on. They were struggling to score points, and now, I mean, I think they're playing as well as anybody in the country. So, again, I think that Alabama-Georgia game in the SEC title game is really going to be a fun game to watch.
Guys, I want to have some fun. I want to try to go through – it's other than March Madness and bowl season, this is probably coming. The week coming up, rivalry week, is probably my favorite week because of all the big games. But I was looking at the schedule last night when I was putting them up here this morning, and I don't really think a lot of these games are going to be really good games. I know they're rivalry games, so you throw the records out. But I want to get your guys' picks here on some of these, and we'll try to speed through them here. But the first one we got, North Carolina had all those expectations. I thought North Carolina would have had a shot to play in the ACC title game. NC State's been peaking. This game's in Raleigh. Normally I'm in North Carolina, but this year we're going to be home for Thanksgiving. Nick, who you got, NC or NC State?
I got North Carolina. I have to ask the question: does the pressure of being the number 1 or number 2 pick in the NFL draft so early for Drake May and Caleb Williams, has that affected their season? Because those two have been the consensus number 1 and number 2 pick all year, and both teams have been struggling. So has the pressure kind of got to them?
Statman, who you like?
I like NC in this game. And I think that Jay Reynolds said I think May is one of the best NFL prospects at quarterback coming out. I think, and I think he's going to finish strong in this game, and I think he takes on the rivalry game.
Not so fast, sweetheart. Not so fast. How about Dave Dorn and the job he's done at NC State since he's been there?
Hate him.
Is he the next like Dave Clawson in the ACC? I mean, he's done a really good job at NC State. You look at their team this year, name me some players that they have. They lost their quarterback. I think NC State beats them at home. I do. I like NC State. I think he's done a fantastic job there.
Agreed.
All right, let me see who I had for the next one here, guys. Let me see here. Let me get to it. Georgia and Georgia Tech. Statman, I'll start with you. Any chance Georgia Tech gets this one at home?
No, I don't think they're gonna win this game. They might make it interesting, but I mean Georgia's just got too much firepower. They're by far the better team. I take Georgia easily.
Medicis, how about you? Any chance?
I mean, if we're talking GPAs, Georgia Tech and all those engineers might have got Georgia, but I mean, if we're talking football, this game's not even going to be close. I think Georgia wins big.
Yeah, I do too. I mean, tip your head, Georgia Tech. They're going bowling, right? They got the 6 wins.
Yeah, they got the 6 wins.
Great turnaround season for them.
Big win over a team that, played a tight end at quarterback. It's a lot to hang your hat on.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, I'm with you. Georgia rolls, no doubt. All right, let me see. Who do I have for the next one here? I have Notre Dame at Stanford. Stanford's played a lot better this year. I'm surprised. Nick, Notre Dame?
Notre Dame big. Stanford's kind of hit or miss all year. They had some good games, and there's other games where they put up a stinker. I think they lost to an FCS team early on. Future ACC team coming in, Stanford. This could be a future women's volleyball game with Notre Dame as an ACC team for everything but football. But, yeah, Notre Dame rolls here.
Statman?
Yeah, I have to agree. Notre Dame all the way.
Yeah, I would agree. It'll be interesting to see Notre Dame, with Marcus Freeman. I mean, Sam Hartman, all those expectations of him coming in, that Notre Dame was a quarterback away from being into the playoffs. So I think it's a disappointing year for Notre Dame, but I think it's a better year. But I think for Notre Dame's expectations, not sure it was the season that they had hoped for, but I'm sure they'll get a New Year's game. I think they hammer Stanford in that game. All right. One of my favorite rivalries. How about the Apple Cup? Washington State. Washington State started off the year really good.
Yeah.
They've kind of faded here a little bit down the stretch. Statman, any chance that Harry and the Huskies lose this one?
No, I don't think so. I think they're going to cruise in this one also.
All right, you're going Washington. Nick, any chance State?
I think this game's going to be close. I think Washington starts looking ahead at that possible Oregon game, knowing they have to beat Oregon to stay in that playoff scenario. So I think this game's close. I think, this past week was a little bit of an eye-opener for Washington. I think they have to still play their A game to beat a good Washington State team. I got Washington, but it's going to be close.
Statman, it's hard to go against Atari Kimball. Harry and the Huskies. Nick, did I ever tell you this one? We've probably talked about it on the radio, but back in the day, Statman and I, when we were about a 30-pack of Foster's beer deep,
Yeah.
we used to play college football, and Statman created one of the best defensive ends in the history of college football. A guy by the name of Atari Kimball.
No, he was the fullback. Freeman
was he
Hartley was the
Freeman
defensive
Hartley,
end.
that's who I couldn't think
Yep.
of. And Harry, give me Harry and the Huskies. I think they win. I think
He'll be
they
funneling
march out.
vodka at halftime.
Oh, yeah, no doubt. No doubt. Give me Harry. All right, the other one. This one could be a trap game. This one could definitely be a trap game. Kentucky at Louisville. Louisville's in the ACC title game. Kentucky, SEC, good in-state rivalry. Statman, any chance Kentucky goes in and beats Louisville?
There's a small chance, I think, but I don't think it's going to happen. I mean, I would for them to win this game. I think they'd have to play the perfect game. No turnovers, no nothing. I just don't see that happening against a tough Louisville team. I think Louisville wins this one, going away towards the end.
Nick?
I think this game's going to be close. I think the depth of the SEC, and Kentucky's been in a lot of close games. They play, again, teams pull away late, but they've been in some ball games. I do think Louisville wins the game because it's at Louisville. I think this is at Kentucky. I'd probably pick the upset and go with Kentucky. But, yeah, I think Louisville very close.
Yeah, I do too. I mean, listen, tip your hat to Jeff Brom coming home to Louisville and taking over this team. But if you look at their schedule, they avoided all the big dogs in the ACC.
Yes, they did.
They didn't have to play anybody this year. So I think the schedule worked out. I think it's great for Jeff Brom. I think Kentucky gets them on the road. I think Kentucky goes in. I think they beat Louisville. SEC speed, they're going to match. Louisville's got a great defense. Louisville's really good, but again, to me, they haven't played anybody in the ACC. So I'm going to go with Kentucky to win that game, but I think it's real. I think this is probably, if it's not the second or third best rivalry game, this one's going to be right up there. I think it's going to be the closer of all the rivalry games. All right, the next one I have. Iowa, who, by the way, is in the Big Ten title game with no offense against Matt Rule in Nebraska. Nebraska has to win this game to be bowl eligible. Nick, Iowa, Nebraska, who you got?
Does it really matter? Both these teams stink. I mean, flip a coin. Maybe it'll be 3-2 at halftime in this one, too. I guess I'll go Iowa 10-7.
Statman?
I'm feeling dangerous here. I'm going to take Nebraska in the upset by 3.
This is a really tough game. You can flip a coin because I love Matt Rule. I think Matt Rule is one of the best coaches in the country. I'd like to see Nebraska go bowling. I'm not a huge Iowa fan, although Ken O'Keefe, one of my former Fordham coaches, who was the OC there for a long time. I'm going to go with Nebraska at home. I don't know why I'm going to pick Nebraska. I think they win. I think they go to a bowl game. And then whoever Iowa plays, it's going to be Ohio State or Michigan. They are going to get trounced in the Big Ten title game. The rivalry just isn't the same without my guy, Mike Leach. Ole Miss at Mississippi State. Lane Kiffin and Mike Leach were good friends in this rivalry. Just Mississippi State, just not the same. I can't even look at him without Mike Leach being on the sidelines. And tip your hat to Lane Kiffin. I've been on Lane Kiffin for a long time. Again, the job he's done at Ole Miss, Jackson Dart's coming back next year for Ole Miss. I'm going Ole Miss. I think Ole Miss rolls Mississippi State. Statman, how about you?
Yeah, I'm going Ole Miss too. Yep.
Nick, any chance?
No, I'm with Reynolds. Ole Miss and the over in that game.
Yeah, I would agree. I think that's going to be a high-scoring game for sure. Now, I would normally say the Iron Bowl is another one of my favorites. But Auburn just got – did you just see who Auburn lost to?
Who'd they play? Can't remember.
I got to pull this back up.
I'm pulling it up right now. They just lost to New Mexico State.
Yes. Now, New Mexico State's in first or second place in that conference.
I don't care.
You can't lose that game, Hugh Freeze. Are you kidding me?
Who's that? The Gauchos? What are they called?
They're the Aggies, I think.
Aggies.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
State?
Yes.
Yeah.
And I love Hugh Freeze. I think Hugh Freeze is going to turn Auburn around. I do like Hugh Freeze, and I think he will win there. But you can't lose to New Mexico State.
No chance you can lose to New Mexico State.
Bama big. I like Bama big. Statman?
Yep, I like Bama also.
Nick?
Yeah, it's not even going to be close. Bama big.
Is Billy Napier fighting for his job at Florida? Florida State, Florida. This was also one of my favorite rivalries.
Yeah, I absolutely think he's fighting for his job. I mean, we just talked about a struggling Kentucky team against Louisville. Kentucky hammered Florida early on. So I think Florida State wins the game. I don't think Napier lasts the year.
Statman?
Yeah, I think Florida State's gonna win this game, and yeah, Napier's gone.
You know, when he got that job, I thought it was a great hire. I really thought Billy Napier would be the guy, at Florida. I didn't think Florida should have got rid of Dan Mullins. I think Dan Mullins should still be the head coach at Florida, and I think Dan Mullins may get the Mississippi State job where he was the coach there before. But I'll say this. I think one name you're going to continue to hear for this is I think Deion Sanders is named to Florida, just with the hype being from the state of Florida. Can you imagine Deion against his former team at Florida State?
I don't think he could take – I don't think Deion would go to Florida knowing he's a Florida State guy.
Yeah, I don't either. But I think you'll hear his name.
The hype, yes, definitely.
The hype will come up. But I think Deion's not going anywhere. He's got a lot to prove at Colorado. I think Florida State wins. I think this game will be close. I think Florida State will be prepared because I think Mike Norvell's done a great job, and I think he'll have the young quarterback ready to play. All right, guys, we're creeping up here. We got 2 more games to pick. If I can find my sheet. How about the old Civil War for the state of Oregon? I thought Oregon State should have won the game last night. I picked them to beat Washington. I thought they'd be physical, too much for Washington. But, again, this will be a good game. I don't think there's a hotter team other than Bama in the country than Oregon. Bo Nix probably definitely put himself in position to win the Heisman Trophy. Any chance, Statman, that Oregon State goes in to Eugene and beats the Ducks?
Not really. I think Oregon's going to win this game. I kind of wanted to tweak Cody and say Oregon State, but I still don't think that's going to happen. I'm going Oregon in this game.
Nick?
I'll say it. I think Oregon State beats them. I think Oregon's already looking at that Washington game. Oregon fans are looking at how Washington struggled to beat Oregon State. And I'm telling you right now, I think Oregon State is a team that could get them. So I'm going to go with the upset. I'm going Oregon State. Remember, this is always the time of the year where 1 or 2 teams that have no business competing with someone playing for the playoffs plays that perfect game and changes everything. And I think this is the game that potentially could knock Oregon out. And then I wouldn't be surprised if Oregon goes ahead and beats Washington the next week and knocks both of the teams out of the playoff conversation, opens things up for an Alabama, for a Texas to sneak in as that 4 seed.
Nick, I like that. I do like that. I think one of the things that Oregon struggles with the most, in my eyes, I think Oregon beats Oregon State, and then I do think Oregon goes in and beats Washington when they play them for the Pac-12 title. I do think they beat them. However, I think the one area where Oregon struggles is against a physical team that's going to smash in the mouth and run the football, and I think Oregon State's that team. I think Oregon State's going to run the football against Oregon. I'm still waiting for that one game where Bo Nix just throws 3 or 4 interceptions late.
It hasn't happened yet.
And it hasn't happened. And listen, tip your hat to him because he's been playing college football for 15 years.
Yep.
And he's had a really good year. I think Jaden Daniels is the best quarterback in the country. I think he should win the Heisman Trophy. I think Maserati Marv should be right there. I think Bo Nix should be right there. And with the game that Bo Nix had this past week, 5 touchdowns or 6 touchdowns?
6 touchdowns.
I wouldn't be surprised if he gets it. But if Oregon State can run the football against Oregon, I think Oregon State can beat them. But with that said, I'm picking the Ducks. I think the Ducks march on, and then I think the Ducks beat Washington in the Pac-12 title game as well.
Still haven't figured out that block button yet, huh? We're still kind of, fixing the cranks there. They'll be fixed for next time.
All right, guys, we're saving the best for last. The game. As Sharon Moore said yesterday, what's happened in the past is over. All we can focus on is the game. In Ann Arbor, no Jim Harbaugh. Ryan Day, 0-2 the last 2 years. If he loses to somebody other than Jim Harbaugh, do the Ohio State fans say, is Ryan Day leaving for the NFL? Does Ohio State go into Ann Arbor? Does all the hype, all the drama surrounding Michigan, does it finally get them at home next week and Ohio State beats them? Statman, Ohio State, Michigan. Who you got?
Well, it's funny. They with Harbaugh being suspended, that might be the only way that Ohio State would have had to win this game, I think. But I still think Michigan does pull this out. I think Michigan wins. Close game, but I think they win.
Oh, okay. Nick, how about you?
When you said big game, I really thought you were talking about Syracuse Wake Forest there until you started talking about Ryan Day and Jim Harbaugh. So I got to kind of change my thought because I thought we were talking Syracuse Wake Forest, 4-7 against 5-6. But yeah, I think playing at Michigan is a huge factor, especially it's like Michigan against the world right now, that mentality that everybody's out to get us. And the only people that believe in us are, the people in this locker room and all those Michigan fans. I think Michigan, again, comes in with that same game plan, hammering the ball, playing physical football. And I think if you're Michigan, if you take Marvin Harrison away and force other guys to beat you, I think you're putting yourself in a great spot. I think Michigan wins the game. I think they kick a last-second field goal. It's really close. And we really sit down and have the argument, Ohio State as the 2, do they drop down past 4? If Michigan jumps them and Michigan's 2, and we're talking Ohio State as the 3, it's probably unrealistic to say the 3 seed losing is going to stay at the 4. But if Ohio State comes out as the 2, they have a realistic shot. Hey, if we do lose this game, and realistically, same with Michigan, if I'm the 2 and I lose, do I have a shot to stay as 4? If I'm 3, I'm probably out with a loss.
Yeah, I'll say this. I think the loser's out this year. I think the loser's out only because I think people say Michigan's schedule wasn't good enough. I think that, I think the top 5 is going to stay basically the same this week. I think it's going to be Georgia, Ohio State, Michigan, and then I think you'll see Washington because I think they were 4 last week, right? And then it was Florida State.
Yeah.
So I think you're going to see it all stay the same. So I think the loser, unfortunately, I think the loser's out. I'm really worried about this game because, again, I think the sample size over the last 2 weeks for me, JJ hasn't looked the same. They haven't had to do much because they've relied on that run game. Now, they've hammered Ohio State on the ground the last 2 years.
Guys, breaking news. I hate to interrupt you, but I just got a breaking news on my phone. Breaking news, Syracuse plans to dismiss Dino Babers as head football coach Sunday.
Wow. All right. Okay.
The beauty of live podcast.
I like it. Yeah, I like it. I'd say I'm surprised, but I'm not surprised. I'm surprised only at the fact that you got one game left. Finish out their regular season, and then if they win, they go to a bowl game. But either way, it doesn't matter to me. I think it's a good move by Syracuse. Hey, maybe Herb Hand, Statman.
Could be.
Maybe Herb comes home to Syracuse.
I could think of worse head coaches easily. Think of worse head coaches to have than Herb Hand.
Yeah, for sure. All right, let me go back to this game. Let me keep going
Sorry
with
to
this
interrupt.
thing.
That was breaking
No,
news.
that's good. I like
Oh,
that.
it's beautiful.
I like that.
That is beautiful.
I do think Michigan's got the weapons to contain Marvin Harrison. I think Marv's still going to get his touches. I think Michigan's secondary got a little bit exposed yesterday, but again, Maryland's got the firepower on offense to score points, so I wasn't really overly surprised. I think for Ohio State, I think they've ran the ball with Henderson a lot more over the last 2 or 3 weeks. I think their defense is better than what it's been the last couple years. But again, for me, I think Michigan's going to control the line of scrimmage. I think JJ is going to have to play a game where he can make some plays with his feet as he did in the Penn State game. I think Michigan wins this game. I think Michigan wins this game close. Right now, I was just looking. Michigan's a 5.5-point favorite at home.
It's a lot of points.
That's a lot of points for that game. I would think that line goes down to a field goal, probably by kickoff. 5.5 is a lot.
I'd jump in on that early before the line starts moving.
Yeah, I think that's a lot. But we'll see. I think it'll be a good game. Michigan just won program win number 1,000, the winningest program in college football. I would love to see Jim Harbaugh come back and win the Big Ten and take that trophy from the commissioner. So we'll see. But listen, if Michigan loses because of the playoff, Michigan will still get a New Year's Six bowl game. I don't know who they would play. Maybe the ACC, maybe Louisville or a Florida State if they lose. But again, I'm going to throw the question out there, and I know C-Bus would disagree with me. I think if Ohio State loses, I think you might see Ryan Day jump to the NFL. You cannot lose to Michigan 3 times in a row, and you can't lose without Jim Harbaugh coaching that game. I just don't see it. If they lose without Jim as the head coach, I just don't see it. I think people in Ohio are going to get frustrated. Now, I think Ryan Day's done a good job there. I think Ryan Day should have won the national championship last year against Georgia, but you can't lose to an assistant coach on the sideline for Michigan. You can't do it, right, guys?
Right.
So we're out of time, but I'm going to throw in. I didn't have it on there, but I will throw the Syracuse Wake game in there because if Syracuse wins, they will be bowl eligible now. With Nick breaking news about Dino Babers being out, does Syracuse find a way to beat Wake Forest and go bowling this season, Statman?
That would be the most Syracuse thing to do right now. So, yeah, I would say yes.
Nick, do they get it done?
I mean, the most Syracuse thing would be to definitely win, give us false hope, and all of a sudden change their mind and say, you know what, Dino won the game, we're going to give him another chance or some nonsense like that.
Yeah.
I think a lot is going to happen. I mean, if this really happens and they do move on, you have a week to kind of move a lot of pieces around to prepare for a game that could determine if you have extra practices, you're bringing in some money for your program. So this is a huge game. I'd love to say I think they win, but I mean, you just don't know what's going to happen this week. Is Schrader going to say I'm shutting it down for the year? I'll go ahead and say Syracuse wins close, but I mean, it's kind of opens your eyes a little bit to see what happens with this program because, like Bill said, it's been a mediocre program for a long time. They need somebody to come in and get some life into the program.
Well, until that news, I was actually going to pick Syracuse to beat Wake. I think Wake has been horrendous this year. But with the news that Dino's gone, I'm going to say Wake comes in, and I think Wake beats Syracuse. And Syracuse will finish, 5-7?
Yep.
This year. So, all right, guys, we are out of time. I got to say, I kind of like the podcast idea.
Me too.
I kind of like it. I came in this morning at work. I got 2 screens up. I'm kind of just chilling, just kind of kick back a little bit. It's nice to see some people, interacting, on the show and whatnot. So we'll have to see going forward, but I kind of like this idea.
Me too.
Me too. I think it'll be fun for guests too, because we can actually see our guests now. We can interact with them a little more often. And I love the comments on the side. I feel like it's a more interactive show. I like that people could call in on the radio, but realistically, you could probably call into this and jump on and discuss things with us. I mean, it was great having Jay and Bill and Cody throwing some things in throughout the show. I'm looking forward to how this shapes out.
Well, you know what's really cool, guys, is I can put the link down in the comment box, so people that are on, if they click the link, they can actually come on live with us, and I can bring them on. So we'll have to see if we can play around with that. But even the fact now with people with social media, everybody's got their phones. So now to turn on Facebook or YouTube or Twitter or LinkedIn, all the social media sites, to be able to listen and see us. They don't have to see us, but I mean they can still listen. So I kind of like it. So we'll see if we roll with it next week. We'll see how our predictions go for the rivalry games, and we'll definitely do more college football, some NFL talk, and more, guys. So good stuff.
Awesome, Coach.
Yeah.
So all right, guys, appreciate you.
All right, have a good rest of your day.
Rock.
All righty. So I want to thank everybody for tuning in. We'll let you know. We'll probably continue with the podcast. It's fun to come in and kick back, relax, and have people interact with us throughout. We're still playing around with times and all that. If we want to do the 9 to 10 or some different time slots, make sure I'll be airing my Chalk Talk over the next couple weeks. Should be a quick half-hour, 1 hour show. I'll talk about all the major topics in sports. I'll take some of your questions and more, and we'll air it right here on the Rock Pile. So thanks for tuning in, everybody. On behalf of the entire Mohawk Valley Sportswatch, Coach Pags, Coach Medicis, and the Statman, enjoy your weekend, everybody. We're out.